My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 45 years old, and for 12 straight years, I was the first one in and the last one out of that office. I worked in operations for a mid-sized logistics firm, the kind of company that grows fast and forgets who got it there. I wasn't flashy, didn't play politics, I just delivered on time, under budget and without fail. They didn't ask for loyalty, but I gave it anyway, until the day they gave me a cardboard box and a stranger's smirk. It happened on a Friday. I'd just finished streamlining a warehouse procedure that saved us thousands a month. I thought I was heading into the weekly strategy meeting. Instead, my boss, Martin Langston, pulled me aside and said, "Dan, we've decided to take the department in a new direction." That's when I saw him. A 20-something kid in overpriced sneakers, standing by the coffee machine like he owned the place. Martin introduced him. "This is Bryce. He's family. He'll be taking over your role." Family, of course. Nephew. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask why. I didn't plead or remind Martin of the 12 years I gave up weekends, holidays, time with my wife. I didn't point out that Bryce once showed up at our Christmas party drunk, asking me what it was I even did at the company. I just nodded, collected the few things I hadn't already passed down to the team, and walked out without looking back. But I wasn't angry, because what Martin didn't know was that I had already planned for this moment. 6 months earlier, I'd quietly purchased the building our company leased. Not out of spite at the time, it was just a smart investment. I'd been saving for years, working with a friend in real estate. The opportunity came up and I took it. No announcement, no attention, just a signature, a deed, and a quiet seat at the top of the food chain. So, when they fired me, they didn't know they were kicking out the man who now owned their roof. I sat in my car for an hour after being let go. Not to wallow, but to breathe. I watched the front doors of the building, people coming in and out like nothing had changed. And maybe for them, nothing had, but for me, everything had, because I wasn't just walking away from a job, I was walking into something far more satisfying: leverage. Quiet, legal, unstoppable leverage. That weekend, I called my property manager and told him the lease renewal for Langston Logistics would be reviewed personally. No rush. I had time. After all, I'd just been freed from the 9-to-5 grind, and now the man who replaced me with his unqualified nephew was about to find out who actually signed his checks. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not my wife, not my friends, not even the colleagues who sent me awkward sorry to hear texts that weekend. I wasn't interested in sympathy. I was interested in focus. Martin thought he'd gotten rid of me cleanly, quietly, but the real story was still unfolding, just not in the way he was expecting, because while he handed me a cardboard box, I was holding the deed to his future. First thing Monday, I met with my lawyer and financial advisor. We reviewed the lease agreement line by line. Langston Logistics had exactly 90 days left before the renewal clause kicked in. The terms were old, comfortable, generous. I'd inherited that from the last owner, but that comfort was about to end. I had no intention of throwing them out, not yet. That would be too easy. No, I had a better plan. Let them sweat first. From the outside, nothing changed. Their staff came and went. Bryce parked in the executive spot that used to be mine, probably still thinking Excel formulas were a foreign language. Martin probably slept like a king that week, thinking he'd streamlined his team with a fresh perspective. But behind the scenes, I began to make subtle adjustments: maintenance schedules, parking permits, office space evaluations, all small, legal but inconvenient changes. The kind that start to chip away at comfort. A month passed before Martin called the property management office, complaining about a new HVAC maintenance fee. He didn't know the call was forwarded directly to me. I listened, calm, quiet, then called back with a professional tone. "Mr. Langston, I understand your concern, but I assure you, the fee structure is fully within the lease terms. You're welcome to review it. Pages 14 through 16, Section 8. He stuttered, said he'd have his assistant look into it. He still didn't know who I was. I kept watching, from a distance. Employees started complaining online about the changes. Office morale dipped. Bryce, from what I gathered, had no idea how to manage the operations. Projects stalled, clients pulled out of deals. And Martin? He started coming in earlier and staying later. For the first time in years, he felt the pressure I used to carry and that he never once thanked me for. It was poetic, but I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing it to teach a man what it feels like to underestimate the person holding everything together. I wasn't loud, I wasn't emotional. I was measured, and I knew that when the lease renewal landed on Martin's desk, tripled in cost, with strict clauses, he would finally realize who he had fired. Not an employee, a landlord, a builder, and now the quiet storm he invited into his empire. The new lease terms were delivered on a Thursday morning. I watched from the upstairs conference room, my private suite, built out quietly over the past month. As the envelope landed on Martin's desk, I saw the way he frowned as he opened it, scanning the numbers. The rent had gone up significantly, and several new operational costs were itemized in exact legal detail. There was no loophole, no room to negotiate, just a sudden realization that the building he once ruled no longer answered to him. I had spent those weeks making subtle changes, yes, but I also made quiet investments. I leased out the floor above them to one of their biggest competitors, a fast-growing logistics startup led by a woman named Rena, who had poise, brains, and an axe to grind with Martin. I gave her half the floor at a fraction of the rate. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted movement above his head, literally. Every time she hosted a team meeting, the vibrations reminded him he wasn't alone at the top anymore. The best part, Martin still hadn't connected the dots. He complained to the property manager, sent emails with legal threats that I read personally and responded to, worded like any seasoned executive, firm, lawful, and utterly unbothered. He had no idea I was sitting one floor above him, sipping coffee in a leather chair that used to belong to his old office. That's the power of silence. You don't have to announce revenge when every inch of it is already in motion. One afternoon, I received a call from one of the senior team members who had quietly followed my exit. "You wouldn't believe what's going on down there," he said. "Bryce can't keep the floor running. We lost 2 contracts. Martin's on edge every day. You okay?" I smiled, leaned back in my chair, and replied, "Never been better." He didn't need to know where I was calling from. Not yet. By week 7, Bryce accidentally sent a company-wide email with confidential financial data. It triggered a mild PR storm, and Martin had to scramble to contain it. I watched the reports roll in. His nephew had become his headache. Meanwhile, the startup upstairs, thriving, sharp energy, loud laughter. People arriving early and staying late for the right reasons. I made sure their team lunch deliveries passed through the Langston office every Friday, a subtle reminder of rising energy versus slow decay. I wasn't interested in gloating. I never walked into that office again. I let the building do the talking, let the lights above them glow brighter, let the elevators ding louder, let the silence below grow heavier with every missed opportunity. Martin had fired me like I was disposable, but now every square foot of the structure reminded him who he'd underestimated, and I still hadn't signed the new lease back. I was giving him just enough rope to feel it tighten on its own. By week 8, Martin finally requested a meeting with me, not with the owner, not with the landlord, but with the mysterious figure behind the lease changes. He still hadn't realized it was me. My property manager arranged the meeting in the upstairs conference room. Same time, I used to walk into his office for updates he barely looked up from. The irony wasn't lost on me. I arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in a quiet navy suit. No logos, no flash, just presence. When Martin walked in, he froze. His eyes searched mine like he was trying to place a face he hadn't seen since he shook my hand and told me I was no longer needed. "Daniel," he said, voice already uneasy. I stood, offered a polite smile, and gestured to the chair across from me. "Have a seat. We've got some lease terms to go over." For the first time in our history, he had no upper hand. I could see it, his fingers twitching, his brow tense. He tried to recover. "Listen, I didn't realize you were the one." I raised a hand gently. "You didn't need to. That's the point." I slid the lease across the table. "The new terms are final. You're free to vacate in 30 days, if it doesn't suit your needs." He blinked, stunned. "You're evicting me?" I shook my head. "I'm offering you a choice. Something you didn't offer me." The silence that followed was delicious. Not bitter, not loud. Just complete. The kind that comes after a long overdue reckoning. He asked for leniency. Said the business had taken a hit lately. Blamed the economy. Blamed inexperience. Never once blamed himself. That's when I knew he still hadn't learned. And that's when I made my final decision. I wouldn't renew the lease. As he stood to leave, he looked at me with something I'd never seen from him before. Not pity, not arrogance. Respect. The kind of respect you only give to someone who didn't fight dirty, but fought smarter. I walked him to the elevator. He glanced around the floor. "You've done well for yourself," he muttered. I nodded once. "I built the place you fired me from. It only made sense to own it." The next morning I sent the formal notice of non-renewal. They had 30 days to vacate. I didn't rush the process. I let it unfold, slowly, cleanly. While upstairs, I signed a new contract with Rena's company, doubling her floor space. She was expanding, and Martin, he was packing. The same cardboard boxes I once carried out were now stacked at his office door. On the morning of their final day, I arrived early before the lights were even on. I walked the perimeter of the building, coffee in hand, and watched as a moving truck pulled up in front of the entrance that once bore my badge. The Langston Logistics nameplate had already been removed, just a rectangle of faded wall where it used to hang. Funny how quickly things disappear when they were never built to last. I stood near the loading dock as employees I used to work alongside, carried out boxes, monitors, furniture, quiet and disgruntled. There was no music, no farewell cake, no final huddle, just low murmurs and the sound of tape ripping over cardboard. Bryce stood near the curb, looking pale, watching as everything he thought he controlled got dismantled before lunch. I don't even think he understood what had happened. His uncle had promised him power, but power borrowed is power lost. Martin arrived just before noon. No suit, no tie, just a slumped posture and an aging expression that hadn't been there months earlier. He caught sight of me across the lot. This time he didn't pretend to look past me. He gave a slow nod, hands deep in his coat pockets. He didn't walk over, he didn't ask for anything. And I didn't move either. That was the unspoken agreement. Some endings don't need words, they just need time. Inside, Rena's team was already setting up on the newly vacated floor. Bright energy, laughter, new paint on the walls. She saw me peering in from the hall and gave a thumbs up. "Couldn't have done this without your timing," she said. I smiled and simply replied, "Right place, right time." But we both knew it was more than that. It was strategy, patience, a kind of strength you earn through quiet humiliation. The cleaning crew finished by evening. All traces of Langston Logistics gone. I walked the floor one last time, remembering the day I'd been fired. I had stood in that very hallway, holding a box of my belongings, listening to Martin's empty words about new directions. Now the space was mine, and it was clean, not just in appearance, but in energy. No bitterness, no weight, just reclaimed air. I locked the door and stood alone in the hallway for a moment. It was never about revenge. It was about being underestimated and letting the truth do the heavy lifting. Martin thought I was a man who could be replaced. But what he didn't realize is that some people are the foundation. Remove them, and the whole damn place falls apart. 3 months later, Langston Logistics was a ghost on Google Maps. Website shut down, numbers disconnected. Word got around fast in the industry. Some people reached out to ask how I pulled it off. I never told them the full story, not because I wanted to hide it, but because the ones who truly understand strength don't ask how it happened. They already know it came from endurance, not anger. Uzivi, my daughter, once asked me why I never fought back when they fired me. I told her, sometimes the best punch you throw is the one they never see coming, and sometimes you don't even throw it. You just step aside and let the floor give out beneath them. She didn't fully understand then, but one day she will. One day when she faces her own moment of betrayal or dismissal, she'll know that silence is not weakness. It's often the start of the smartest plan. Rena's company now occupies 3 floors. I serve on her board in a consulting role, not because I need the money, but because I respect her fire. She built what Martin tried to fake. Real leadership, real vision. And every time I walk into that building, people greet me with respect, not because I demand it, but because I earned it. Not loudly, not forcefully, but fully. I've run into a few of the old Langston employees since. Some landed on their feet, others not so much. A few apologized for not speaking up, for going silent when I was pushed out. I never held it against them. They were surviving, just like I was. But the difference was, I was also planning, and that's what changed everything. Quiet planning beats loud pride every single time. Martin never reached out again. No letter, no call, no admission of guilt. But he didn't have to. Every month that he doesn't walk into that building is enough. Every time someone else signs a lease on the office he once ruled, that's closure, not revenge. Just a full circle moment, sealed without a word. And that's more powerful than anything he could have said. So now, I wake up each morning, step into the elevator, and press the button for the top floor, the one he never let me reach. And every time those doors open, I remember the day he told me I wasn't needed anymore. And every single time I smile, because now I own the place where he lost everything, and I didn't need to yell to win. I just needed to wait.